Welcome to Trail Tales ARP
a running podcast for every type of runner.
with Sean Sobond and Russell the Runner.
Hi everyone, it's Russell the Runner here with Trail Tales ARP, and we have an amazing episode today. We have an endlessly inspirational ultra runner and even more so human being with us today, Adam Koppany. Adam has had a beyond phenomenal life journey. He has journeyed 9 100-mile ultra marathons in his life. He has some beyond inspiring plans this year for 2023. And we are endlessly fortunate to have Adam with us here on the podcast. How are you, Adam?
Hey, Russell the Runner. Good to connect with you, bud. I'm doing really well. Thanks.
That's awesome to hear. And we're endlessly happy to have you on the podcast. And all of our listeners are going to endlessly enjoy this. So let's jump on into it. Let's dive deep here in the beginning, Adam. Like I said earlier, you've had a phenomenal journey in finishing 9 different 100-mile ultra marathons, which include Ontario's most challenging 100-miler in Haliburton twice, the Vermont 100 3 different times, 2 of those being in under 20 hours and the other one in endlessly challenging conditions in under 21 hours, as well as Eastern States 100 in incredibly challenging Pennsylvania, just to name a few of the ultras. As a seasoned and veteran ultra marathoner, what would be your top 3 tips for individuals looking to get into both running and ultra marathoning, respectively?
Well, for running, if you're sort of on the beginner side of things, I like to tell everybody this, but strength training is a huge one for me. And I think everybody should be doing it. And, runners are sort of notorious for kind of ignoring strength training. And I think it's super important. So that would be one. Another one for new runners is just be consistent. A lot of runners, they try to maybe look at doing, they try to do maybe too much too quickly, whereas it's really important to just take small steps at the beginning and try to get something done, every day. It doesn't have to be long, but really, like, you're better off to get at it 6 or 7 days a week rather than do like 1 or 2, big training sessions where you maybe overdo it. And, thirdly, sort of build volume slowly. That's certainly another important one for new runners is work your way up, because really you want to avoid injury, for people getting into running. And it's super, super common for runners to get injured. I've been injured a few times myself in the past. But that's one of those things that, it's almost an unavoidable part of it as you're building up your running base. And then for ultra runners, people who may be a little more experienced, who want to get into ultra running, again, strength training is definitely key. Do a variety of races, I think, is also key for ultra runners, is at the same distance, rather than like jumping into a 50K and then going, right for a 100-miler right after that, like do a whole bunch of 50Ks and different 50Ks. And that way you gain some experience at that distance and you kind of get comfortable. You kind of know what to expect. You know how to, problem solve and get your nutrition sort of down. And then once you kind of do a whole bunch of the same, distance races, then look at stepping it up to the next distance, 50K, 50-miler, do a bunch of 50-milers, then, look for 100K, do a few 100Ks, and by the time you've had that sort of a base, you're probably a few years in, you're well equipped at that point to really take on a 100-miler, because all 100-milers are hard. I mean, I don't care what course it is, how flat it is. To move your body over the course of 100 miles by foot is extremely difficult, and they're all hard. I've never had an easy one, in spite of how many of them that I've done now. But yeah, those are kind of some of the top tips I think that would come to mind for people who are new to running and also wanting to step up to the ultra distance.
obviously with your endless experience over decades of ultra running and running in general, those are all amazing tips, Adam. I specifically appreciate your advice of strength training. I know personally during my journey these past nearly 5 years of running, I didn't do strength training for the first 2.5 to 3 years. And I found for myself at a certain point, your body can only go so far without strength training. I I remember after my first 100K ultra marathon, I was trying to work up to 125K, and I actually had to stop at 110K with only 15 kilometers to go to my arbitrary goal. And that's because my body had run out. It was essentially exhausted and had no strength left. And at the time, I hadn't done any strength training. And I found
it beats you up.
Progressed, yeah, it beats you up horribly. And that's why I endlessly appreciate your advice of strength training, which has worked for me in my journey. And clearly it's been endlessly successful for you with the various 100-mile ultra marathons that you've been able to do.
It certainly helped. Yeah.
Yeah. And consistency. I mean, I'm sure you would agree with me in terms of and building volume, that the 10% rule is a good rule of thumb to not build your mileage by more than 10% each week, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty good general guideline, but it really kind of depends on the person, right? How it depends where their sort of baseline starting point is too, right? If someone's fairly athletic and they've already had, like years of, say, playing sports or something like that, versus somebody who's, say, just coming off the couch for the first time, kind of getting into running and starting with a 5K. Those are two very sort of different starting points.
That makes perfect sense. I know, for example, I was active my whole life. I didn't become a runner until I was 24. But with that being said, I know playing basketball and different sports my whole life, when I got into running, it came fairly naturally. And
yeah. So you already had a decent starting point where, you can build off of that. And then, if you sort of apply that 10% guideline, it's sort of a general guideline that's a good way to gradually build up volume into your training. But I mean, pretty quickly, you can get up to 100K weeks, pretty
absolutely
quickly.
Yes, especially with the consistency, correct? I mean, if you're, say, hypothetically, this message is for people who are looking to get into running off of the couch, like we've talked about.
Yeah.
Let's say you start with 3 5-kilometer runs a week. Then eventually you could build up to 4 5-kilometer runs a week, et cetera, et cetera. And before you know it, within a year, you actually could reach 100-kilometer weeks off of the couch, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But I mean, success, I think, with ultra running really helps to have like a really deep base of long consistency in terms of training, getting used to moving your body. So, the reason why I can kind of train at the level that I can right now, and, I'm 44 years old, is because I've had 20 plus years of endurance sports. I've done countless races, everything from triathlons to mountain bike racing, cross-country skiing, obstacle racing was a huge thing I was into for a while, and obviously ultra running. But, my base is so wide with endurance sports that, at my age, I can sort of take volumes of training that I am doing right now a lot better than someone with maybe just 1 or 2 years of running under their belt.
Absolutely. And those wide range of sports, for example, cross-country skiing and those different types of sports that you've been doing, clearly that adds to your athleticism and, like you're saying, your base and in making you more successful in ultra running specifically, correct?
It definitely helps. Yeah. I mean, having sort of an athletic background growing up, playing soccer, I've pretty much been doing endurance sports, like I said, since I was like in my teen years, so it's actually like 30 years now of some kind of sports, and certainly specifically endurance sports the last 20 years.
In which, based on that, clearly that's led you to this phenomenal life journey that you've been on and continue to have. And so let's jump further deep into this, Adam.
All right.
For everyone that uh, obviously that doesn't know, Adam is registered for Canada's first 200-mile ultra marathon this year.
Ooh.
And it's called the Great Divide, and it's through the Canadian Rocky Mountains, and it's endlessly challenging. What's the elevation gain for throughout the 200 plus miles of the Great Divide, Adam?
It's over 40,000 feet cumulative climbing and descending. Yeah.
Which is
So it's a lot.
That's nearly 1.5 times going up Everest
Yeah.
throughout the
Yeah, it's a lot.
entire journey. It's a huge amount. And to continue on, obviously your longevity in our ever difficult and beautiful sport, it's beyond incredible, Adam. And obviously we've talked about how strength training is endlessly crucial for you on a daily basis. Could you tell us about the specific strength training exercises you do and find to be most effective for ultras? What are the main activities that you find are needed in being successful and having longevity in ultra marathon in general?
I'd like to kind of keep it fairly simple. You don't really need a lot of equipment, but really, like, I'm consistent. I strength train 5 days a week, pretty much religiously. I only train, strength about 30 minutes a day. But my favorite exercises are always with the kettlebell. I love the kettlebell swings, deadlifts. Any kind of compound movements I think are really beneficial. I don't have a specific kind of routine, but I do a lot of body weight stuff. So, every day I try to aim for 100 push-ups, 50 pull-ups, 100 squats, 50 deadlifts, 50 kettlebell swings, and 100 sit-ups. And then on top of that, basically my basic equipment is dumbbells, one barbell with some plates, and a kettlebell. And I also use a slam ball as well. So I do a lot of compound stuff like, the heavy ball pickup and lift it over your head. Just trying to keep my body really resilient and always moving and always like just lifting heavy things. So, I try to avoid sort of the traditional, like, gym kind of exercises like bench press and stuff like that. But, more so it's the compound type movements I think that are really beneficial. I use a lot of rubber bands as well because glute strength is a really, really big, important one for me, to, maintain stability and also to avoid injury. Because, years ago I struggled with ITB syndrome from weak glutes, so I do a lot of rubber band work, side to side laterals, knee ups, just really trying to maintain solid glute strength and quad strength. So, I think the at the most basic exercises I think would be like kettlebell swings, and deadlifts, and maybe like a dumbbell squat to overhead press, are kind of the best all around exercises that keep your body resilient and strong against injury. And especially for people who are over 40 years old, you start to lose muscle mass, you start to lose bone density. And that's super, super important, especially if you're an endurance athlete or any kind of runner, to maintain strength training. In addition to running, it would be the one other thing that I would tell everyone that they should be doing is lift up heavy things, pick them up and put them down.
That's couldn't be more critical advice. And obviously you're an endless example of how it's proven with all of your success throughout your journey.
Hey, thanks, man.
Of course. And I specifically appreciate you mentioning compound movements. I can see it and understand how those types of movements would be effective for ultra running because you're engaging your entire body, which is also important in ultra running. And I'm curious, do you do any, obviously you've mentioned a good amount of the exercises you've done. I know I personally do a lot of weighted squats and weighted lunges as well. Do you ever do any of those activities as well on top of all the other exercises you've mentioned?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I do lunges, I often get on my treadmill with a weighted vest as well. And I'll just climb, I'll climb up and down and I'll do forward and backwards. on the treadmill with a weighted vest, as just a way to sort of add a little extra stress and weight to the climbs. One of the specific things I've started doing this year in preparation for the Divide 200, which you mentioned, that really is my primary goal for this year. That's been my entire focus for the last year now, since the registration opened up and I decided I was going to do it. I started rucking. So I got a heavy pack and threw some plates in the back. So every morning when I take my dogs for a walk, I ruck with a 70-pound pack on my back for 30 minutes. So that's been sort of another, it's not really strength training, but again, it's adding like that resistance, when you're moving your body to also, it puts pressure on your shoulders, extra weight on your hips and your knees. And again, it's all to build resiliency to keep your body moving over the course of, 2, 3, 4 days, whatever it's going to take to get to the finish line of that race.
Absolutely. That's incredibly hardcore. Obviously, you're incredibly strong, and that's well within your capacity to handle that. I mean, 70 pounds, carrying that and moving with that, and how that impacts your body for half an hour. I mean, clearly it's endlessly strengthening, right?
I like to do a variety of exercises with that incorporate strength as well. And that's why, like I said, between, rucking, between getting on the treadmill with a weighted vest, between, the consistency of doing heavy compound movements and body weight exercises, I try to just do a lot of different things every day so that, you're constantly giving your body a stimulus that's going to create that adaptation.
That makes perfect sense. And the wide variety of activities that you do specifically in strength training obviously give you an extra amount of advantage. I mean, a huge amount of advantage in strengthening your body for the impact of obviously preparing for a 200-mile ultra marathon.
Yeah. I mean, I want to put myself in the best position, to get to that start line, fully healthy, ready to go. And with a body that's, resilient and strong, that can withstand, like I said, 2, 3, 4 days of moving through the mountains and climbing upwards of 40,000 feet of elevation gain. So, that's no small amount of vert to go after.
No, it's an endlessly significant amount, of course. But
challenging, super challenging terrain too.
Yes. I mean, it would be quite technical in the Rocky Mountains of Alberta, right? And I know you grew up in Alberta, right?
No, I grew up in Ontario, but I lived in Alberta for 10 years through my 20s.
Oh, that's right. It was in your 20s. Okay.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time, like hanging out in the mountains, camping, hiking, running. So I do have sort of that mountain alpine experience that I think will be really helpful for the race.
Absolutely.
And it's just a long way to cover, obviously 200 miles, it's 330 odd kilometers.
Yes, that would be
wild.
the conversion for
it's scary to say
Canadians
that out loud.
who don't know the kilometer to mile version. Yes. Well, I know I'm a serious math nerd, which I believe you know, Adam. 200 miles is exactly 322 kilometers, but I would assume that it's a bit further than 200 miles.
Yeah, I think
it's 205 miles,
204 or 5 miles ish.
Yes,
but,
which is an extra. Probably at the end of that, that's at least another extra hour, at least, obviously, right?
Yeah, after that many hours, I don't know if it makes that much of a difference.
I guess it's minimal compared to the grand journey itself. Yeah. And so with the Great Divide, I mean, obviously we've talked about a good amount of the ways that you've prepared for this journey. Actually, one other question I have is specifically running wise, what has your weekly mileage looked like? Or how much is it exactly? Or give us a range of what that would look like in preparing for the Great Divide 200.
So over most of the winter, it actually wasn't that much. I was running anywhere from around, 65 to maybe 85K a week.
Okay.
Again, most of the focus was on strength and lifting, as well as rucking. And as we moved into spring and my races are starting to get closer now, the volume starts to go up. And this is where that strength training really pays off, because I can quickly increase my volume from that, 70, 80K a week mark. Recently I've been hitting 160, 150K weeks, and I've been doing that now consistently for about the last 6, 7, 8 weeks or so, kind of between 130 and 160. But that is a big jump from what I was doing in the winter in preparation to, run QMT, which is 2 weeks from tonight, actually.
Absolutely. In which obviously everyone knows that a 200 plus mile adventure is endlessly mental. And based on that, I mean, your weekly mileage doesn't have to be exponentially high. In fact, it would be more beneficial for it to be slightly lower. I would say that the range that you've been doing throughout the winter and emphasizing strength training, and then as spring arrives, upping it, like you said, to 80 to 100 miles a week or 130 to 160 kilometers per week is strategic. Because it's going to take an endless amount of mental fortitude to obviously make it through the Great Divide 200. And based on that, which doesn't have to be insanely high. And the most important thing is showing up healthy in order to take on that mental challenge, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think at that distance, a lot of it does come down to your mindset, like how badly do you want it? How badly do you want to get to that finish line? And, part of what I've done with my training to get ready for the divide is to focus on some of those mental aspects of sort of toughening and sharpening my mind and really trying to put myself through difficult challenges in a way that, will help me get through really difficult, long nights in the mountains in the middle of that race. Because, when you hit 130, 150 miles and you're in the middle of the night on the third night, everything about you is going to say quit.
Yes.
You can get a ride back to the beginning and get a nice shower and get asleep. Absolutely. Well, you know what? No, fuck that.
Exactly. Yeah. I like the profanity specifically with that. And obviously this journey will have endless meaning for you and your journey and your life. And there is no quit in you. Jumping into logistics and pacers, will you have a crew and or pacers to support you with logistics and keeping you company on this multi-day adventure?
As of right now, no. It's I did have someone who was going to help me out. Yeah. But they're no longer able to help out. So I'm kind of on my own. So I am looking for help. So if anyone is going to be in Southern Alberta in September and wants to come out and either pace or help crew, crew is not so important to me. Really, it would be nice to have a pacer, especially for the overnights through the mountains, because I've experienced plenty of overnights through 100-milers and it's challenging for sure, and to have somebody, even if you're not talking, but just to have somebody to move with, really makes a difference in terms of how quickly you can move.
Absolutely.
So, as of right now, yeah, solo.
I'm sure that you will find people and that they will come to support you, Adam, for those endlessly challenging times ahead. I'm curious with regards to nutrition. What's your plan for nutrition throughout the 200-mile?
Yeah, pretty much eat all the food.
Eat everything.
Eat everything.
You're not focusing on anything specific. You're just loaded all.
Man, you know that old saying, right? Like, it's not just a race, it's an eating contest as well,
Yes, it is. And I know, and you've made me PB&J sandwiches in Halliburton, which has always been endlessly appreciated. And yes, it is an eating contest. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't focus on really anything specific. I try to avoid a lot of the like really sugary gels and stuff like that. They're okay for the first couple hours, but you find that the longer the race goes on, the more, personally speaking, I crave more real food.
Yes.
Like it's great to have like a sandwich or a quesadilla.
Burgers, quesadilla.
Yeah.
Mashed potatoes, right?
Potatoes and pickles are like some of my favorite things for sure. Potatoes, pickles, and salt. It's like great combination. Yeah. PB&J sandwiches are always great. Really anything that's kind of real food really makes a difference as the race goes on. And I imagine in a 200, especially when you're going on like day 2 and 3, that you're really going to want to stick to like actual real food, calorie dense food, stuff that's going to give you plenty of energy.
Absolutely. Whereas with 100 miles or less, some can rely on gels and other types of more, straightforward ultra marathon specific
Yeah, or the
effects.
bars,
But with
stuff like
this,
that.
real food couldn't be more critical.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Adam. Well, finally, in terms of your long-term plans beyond the Great Divide 200, which is absolutely beyond phenomenal to begin with, of course, do you have any other significant ultramarathon journeys in the back of your mind for the future? And what are your biggest dreams for your life in our beautiful sport?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do. I foresee myself wanting to go after bigger goals and bigger races. I do want to do all of the 200s that are out there.
Candace's?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was actually on the Tahoe wait list this year, and it
That's right.
wasn't
You
moving
mentioned that.
anywhere. Yeah, it wasn't moving at all, and I was on the wait list for the longest time, and then it was kind of getting close, there in March, and I decided like, hey, I gotta pull the trigger on something else just in case. So I jumped into QMT instead. And then they moved the race date of Tahoe, so I couldn't do it anyways. Yeah, into July. So, Tahoe's definitely on the list. Moab's on the list. Bigfoot's on the list. And actually, right now, I think at the top of my list that I'm really considering registering for next year's Cocodona 250 in Arizona.
You are considering the Cocodona 250 for next year.
Yeah, I think that's the top of my list right now. It's just that's a tough one for Canadians, especially because it's an early season race at the beginning of May. So you don't really get a whole lot of time to you don't get a long runway to prep.
No, you
especially,
don't.
But part of that, maybe not a bad thing because then you're forced to run in, worst winter conditions, harder winter conditions. And, part of suffering through and getting through a long 200 plus mile race is, purposely subjecting yourself to difficult circumstances and difficult training conditions. Because again, that, helps toughen up the mind and helps give you that no quit mentality to be able to finish a race like that.
Absolutely. Couldn't be more critical. I know my friend, endlessly inspirational. Shout out to Brian Bondi, who's from Canada, who finished the Cocodona 250 this year.
Awesome.
You should connect with him.
That's
all right,
amazing.
Adam. Well, it's been amazing to have you on the podcast. Your plans for this year couldn't be more inspirational. And thank you for joining us. And
yeah, thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
And I'm sure
it was fun.
Obviously will love this episode.
Hope so. Yeah, it was fun. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we have a phrase that we end our podcast with, which is run wild.
Run wild. Woo.